Hey guys, in this video we are going to build the real-time view counter with SWR and Nextjs API routes. First of all, sorry guys for the noise. I will try to remove as much as I can. So we are going to build the real-time view counter, but how it will work. So every time a user will visit a blog, the total views field of that blog document in our MongoDB database will get increased by 1. So that means whenever the page component will be mounted, we will increment the total view field of that blog. But what about the real-time view showing? That's why we are going to use the SWR. It's a very lightweight package for data fetching in React. It has been developed by Vercel, the same organization that created Nextjs. It is real-time, backend agnostic, Jamstack oriented, also TypeScript ready. It is a very cool package. So why does SWR exist? So what happens when you try to fetch some data from an API endpoint? You send a request to the API endpoint, then the user sees a loading state, right? When the response is ready, then the user sees the data. Now, what if you try to fetch data from the same endpoint again? Same process will get repeated. Client will send a request to the API. The user will see maybe a blank screen or some kind of loader, and when the response will be ready, user will see the data. Well, first time it was okay, but multiple times it will not be okay. It will be a bad user experience. So libraries like SWR solves the problem for you. So with SWR, when you try to fetch the data, the same process will repeat, but here is a difference. SWR will cache the response. So whenever you try to fetch that data again from the same API endpoint, user will not see any kind of loading state. User will see the old data, but behind the scene, SWR will fetch the data from that endpoint. And when the response is ready, SWR will update the data, user will see the new data, and also SWR will cache the new response. And it will keep happening again, so that user won't see any kind of blank screen or any kind of loader again. And that is good user experience. And it has also some revalidation feature. So that's why it is called SWR, stale while revalidate. It has bunch of features for revalidation. For example, if you lose a focus from the current tab and then you get the focus on the tab again, it will fetch the data again from the API and will show you the real result. And it will revalidate the result on interval after some times. It will also revalidate your data on reconnect, and has bunch of other features. So what I would recommend you to visit the SWR docs page and you will understand it more. And I have also wrote a blog about why you should use SWR. I would recommend you to check that out. I will put the link on the description. So what we are going to do is, first of all, we are going to show the user the static data of our total views. Then we will try to fetch the data with SWR. Once the data is ready, we will update our page. So we need to create some APIs. API for incrementing our total views field on our document, and we also need to have an API for fetching the data. So how are we going to do this? Don't worry, we are not going to implement our own server from scratch. We are going to use Nextjs API routes, which is a serverless feature that comes with Nextjs. If you don't know anything about Nextjs API routes, I would highly recommend you to check their docs out. They have a pretty good documentation. So let's create our APIs. Now you might have noticed in our pages directory, we have also an API folder. We haven't really used it. So what is this API folder? We need to use this API folder to create our endpoints. Like we have created our pages with pages directory, we are going to use API directory to create our API endpoint. So for example, we have a hello file inside of API directory. So this hello file is representing /API/hello endpoint. If I create a blog.js file inside the API directory, then it will represent /API/blog route. Just like the normal pages directory, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a directory here. I will call it views. And inside the views directory, I'm going to create a dynamic API endpoint. I will call it slug. So again, it is a dynamic route. That's why we need to wrap the file name with square brackets. So slug.js. So from this file, we need to export a function. So const handler, which will be an asynchronous function. And also we need to export it. Export default handler. Now this handler function will take two parameters. One is the request, another one is the response. And it is similar to Node.js Express. And if you have any experience, it will be familiar to you. Now I'm going to destructure the request object, and I will pull out the method property, and the method property says what type of request it is. So we are going to expect to have two type of request. One is the get request, another one is the post request. If the method is get request, we will send the current total views data. If the method is post, then we are going to increment our total views field by 1. Okay, so let's create a if condition for that. If method is equals to get, and also if method equals to post. Okay, so this two type of request we will have. And also we want to get the slug value. So it has a query object, and which has a slug property. This is the slug that we want. And also we are going to use MongoDB here. So let's import ConnectDB and blog model. Okay, now let's connect our application with MongoDB. Await ConnectDB. Now first I will handle for get request. So blog model dot find one, and for the query object I will check for slug, and for projection I only want total views field. So let's get the value. Const, I will destructure the total views field, total views, and also we need to await this process. Now we need to return a response. So return res dot status, and we're going to send 200 as HTTP code, and 200 means okay. And I also send the response as JSON. So it will take an object, and I will just pass the total views. So let's handle the post request. So we want to update one document. So blog model dot update one, and also the filter object will be the slug, and then our update object. We need to use the inc operator to increment the value, which is an object, and I want to increment total views field by 1. Okay, so let's store the result. Const update, and also we need to await this. And now we need to check if any document has been modified or not. So if, now this update object will have a nModified property. If the nModified property value is 1, that means one document has been updated, then we can send a success response. So update dot nModified equals 1, then I will send a response, again 200 for okay, and JSON success to true. And if that failed, we want to send a 404 error. So we are sending a 404 error with the message error happened. And also I'm going to wrap the whole function body inside a try catch block. Try. I will just end the request with res.end, and I will just send a string. Okay, so let's save the file and try the API. So I will go to this endpoint /API/views, then a slug. So let's see if it works or not. Okay, so as you can see that we have a response object which says total views equals to 0. Now let's add it to our front end of our application. So I'm just going to create a custom hook for SWR data fetching because I'm going to reuse that. So inside the source folder, I'm going to create a hooks directory, and inside the hooks directory, I'm going to create a file, use API swr.js. Let's open that up. I will import from swr, use swr. So I will create a custom hook, const use API swr, which will return use swr hook. Now use swr hook takes two parameters. First is the key, and second one is a fetcher function. So the key will be the URL, which we will get through the parameters URL and pass URL, and also we need a fetcher function. So let's create one. I also need to import Axios, and Axios is just a data fetching package. So const fetcher, it will be a asynchronous function. So Axios dot get, because we want to send a get request and we need to pass a URL. Now the fetcher function will get URL as a parameter. So URL, and this URL will be same as this URL. SWR will just pass this URL parameter to the fetcher function, and the URL will be cached. So just pass the URL to the Axios, and let's await and store the result. Const await. Now the response will have a data object, so I will just restructure that and return data. And also I need to export this hook. Export default, use API swr. Now let's open up the blog preview file. So blog, then blog preview, and I will just import the hook. Import use API swr from, now let's call the use API swr const. I will destructure the return data, then use API swr, and the key will be /API/views/the slug. So just pass the slug, and this hook will return us an object. It will have a data property which will hold our response, and it will also have an error object. I'm just going to destructure the data, and this data will have our response. So let's just console log that. So let's save the file. Alright, as you can see that first time it was undefined because the response wasn't ready. Now we have our data which has a total views field. So we also need to check if the data is undefined or not. So in the total views of card subheader, we need to use a ternary operator because we can't use if condition in JSX. So we need to check if data is true. That means we have an object not undefined. Then we want data dot total views, else we want the old total views data. Okay, and also I forgot to add the views word, so views. Okay, so we don't have any error. It is still 0 views because we haven't really updated our blog total views data. Okay, and also we need to do the same thing to our individual blog page. In the pages directory, then blog, then slug. So let's import use API swr hook, import use API swr, and I will just copy this line and paste it here. So as you can see that we have spread out all of our blog object, but I want to override the total views field. Now the syntax that I'm going to show you might look weird to you, but don't worry. So I'm going to delete this one, and again the curly braces, then the spread operator. Now I'm going to pass a new object where I'm going to spread the blog again. Then I'm going to pass a total views field to overwrite total views. Now again, I want to check if data is ready or not. So data is true, then total views will be data dot total views. Else I want to keep the old data, total views. Okay, so now what is happening in this line is, first I have created this object, the inner one, and in that object I have spread out the blog object and override the total views field, and then I have spread out the new created object. Okay, so let's save the file to format the code. So let's update our data. Now to update our data, we're going to use a use effect hook. Now in case if you don't know what use effect hook is, use effect is kind of like combination of lifecycle methods like component did mount, component unmounted, and something like that. We want to have the component did mount lifecycle method feature in our blog page. Now when does component did mount run? When the component has just mounted. So when the whole component will be mounted, we want to update our data. We want to send a request to our API routes. So use effect. The use effect hook takes a function as a parameter, which can't be asynchronous. Okay. Now this function body will run after every render. Okay. But we don't want that. We only want to run this function after the component has been mounted. So we can pass a second argument to the hook, which is an array of dependencies. If you just pass an empty array, it will only run after the component gets mounted. Okay, so in this function body, we're going to send a request through Axios. So let's import Axios. Now the Axios methods are asynchronous, so we need to await them, but we can't use await keyword outside async function, and the async function cannot be our callback function in the hook. So I'm going to use a iffy function, which stands for immediately invoked function. Let me just show it to you. So first give a parentheses, then inside the parentheses you just need to give your function body async, and this is my function body, and outside the parentheses you need to give another parentheses. So this parentheses is just our function body, and this parentheses is just our function call. Now inside our function body, I'm going to call Axios post method, axios.post, and we need to pass a URL. It will be /API/views/ the slug. So let's await that. And also I'm going to wrap this line inside a try catch block to handle any kind of error. And also after updating, we need to mutate our SWR cache to show the updated version of our data. So this object has another property, actually a method, which is called mutate. So after the updating is done, we want to call the mutate function, and our application should work. Okay, so if I go one of this blog, first we should see 0 views, then we should see 1 views. Okay, we have a problem. Total views is not defined. Let's see. Okay, so we just need to do blog.totalViews. Blog.totalViews. Now let's save the file again. Hey, did you see that it has first 0 views, then 1 views? Let me just refresh the page again. And just see at the bottom of the page. See, it has shown 1 views at first, then it has shown 2 views, right? So our first post request was just updating our data to the database, and then the mutate function, this mutate function is just updating our SWR cache, and we are seeing the latest data. Okay, so this is our view counter. If I go to the home page, we should see 2 views again. See, it has 2 views. If I go to this page again, we should have 3 views. See, we have now 3 views. So our view counter is really working. And that's it for this video. We are almost done with the video series, And if you have been following along with the series, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And in the next video, we are going to deploy our application to Vercel. Vercel is the organization that created Nextjs, and I will show you how you can deploy your website in Vercel. So if you have any question, please comment down below. You can reach out to me on any social media as thatonjohn. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you next time.